In Roe versus Wade, Justice Blackmun argues that viability is a crucial point in the development of the fetus. And this is one of the things that Roe versus Wade is most well known for. This is one aspect of the decision that is well known even among people who don't know the decision that well. Viability, that viability is crucial. According to Justice Blackmun, this point of viability is crucial for accurately thinking through the ethics and morals and legality of abortion. There's something that happens at viability to the fetus that is crucial for how we treat it. Because in Justice Blackmun's view, prior to viability, the state may not regulate at all with a view toward protecting the fetus. Whereas post-viability, after viability, the state may pass regulations aimed at protecting the life and health of the fetus. So there's something about viability that's crucially important. Now, oftentimes people treat Roe versus Wade as saying something like, prior to viability, abortion is morally permissible. After viability, it's morally impermissible. It's wrong. That is not at all what Justice Blackmun claims. That's not at all what Roe versus Wade claims. It doesn't say anything like that. It does not claim that abortion is morally or legally impermissible after viability. All it says is that after viability, the states may, if they so choose, pass regulations to protect the life and health of the fetus, the potential life of the fetus. But nonetheless, there are popular misconceptions of Roe versus Wade in popular culture, as you might imagine. That's one of them. Nonetheless, viability is crucially important, according to Justice Blackmun. And so what we're going to look at now is his argument for why it's important. Why does a state interest in the potential life of the fetus become compelling at the point of viability? Why, in other words, can the state now pass regulations to protect the fetus at the point of viability? Why does viability mark this crucial point? And so what I want to do is look at Justice Blackmun's argument in detail. So there it is right there, Section 10, page 18. Justice Blackmun is clear. He's thankfully very clear about this. In what he says, with respect to the state's important and legitimate interest in potential life, the compelling point is at viability, right? What we've just been talking about. This is so because the fetus then presumably has the capability of meaningful life outside the mother's womb. And then he goes on to talk about other things. That's the argument. And one sign that it's an argument, it's not just him saying what he thinks, but that it's an actual argument, is what I'm circling right there. This is so because. When you see words like that, what they indicate is that the statement or statements that come after them are supposed to give a reason or an argument for the statement that comes before. So we have the claim that the compelling point is viability, which in other words means that the state at the point of viability can pass laws to protect the potential life of the fetus. Well, why at that point? Why not earlier? Why not later? Why at that point? Well, here's Justice Blackmun's argument. This is so because, right? Those words indicate that his argument, the reason for viability being this crucial point, are going to come next. Right? So this is so because the fetus then presumably has the capability of meaningful life outside the mother's womb. That's the argument. Because the fetus has the capability of meaningful life outside the mother's womb, that's why viability is this crucial point. Now, I'll kind of lay my cards on the table, at least with regard to this argument. I do not think this is a particularly compelling or good argument. I'm not alone in this. And it's not just, and it's not a pro-life, pro-choice dispute. There are plenty of people on the pro-choice side of the aisle, so to speak, um, who think this argument doesn't work, who think the decision in Roe versus Wade um, is faulty in any number of ways, who think that viability is morally irrelevant. And we'll be reading one such philosopher later named Peter Singer. I believe that's week 3. We'll see him explicitly argue against viability as a more morally significant criterion. But let's examine Blackman's argument. Does this give us a good reason for thinking of viability as this crucial point in development? Well, that's going to turn on what exactly the reason is. What exactly capable of a meaningful life outside the mother's womb means. And one initial problem with this argument is that phrase doesn't wear its meaning on its sleeve, so to speak. It's not entirely clear what that means. And it seems to be ambiguous between at least 2 different claims. It might mean one of 2 different things. It might mean something like the following. Perhaps capability of meaningful life outside the mother's womb means something like the fetus will likely survive if it's born at that point. Perhaps that's what it means. That's one kind of natural reading of those words. But another natural reading of those words is something like the following. So the fetus has the capability of meaningful life outside the mother's womb. Maybe that just means the fetus could potentially go on to live a meaningful life. The fetus at that point, capable of meaningful life outside the mother's womb, what that means is that the fetus has the potential to become a contributing, productive member of society. Someone who has a career and a family and contributes to the community and so on, right? Perhaps that's another way that we might read that phrase, capable of meaningful life. Maybe the outside the mother's womb. Maybe meaningful life outside the mother's womb means like being a productive member of society, having a meaningful life in that sense, holding down a career, having a family, and so on. And the fetus has the capability, the potential to live a life like that. Maybe that's what Justice Blackman is getting at. So the first thing Justice Blackman would, or that we'd like to see, I guess, if we're trying to make these arguments more precise, trying to figure out what exactly the argument is, first thing we'd like to see is a little bit more clarity on this point. Which one of these 2 things is Justice Blackman getting at? It's for all Roe versus Wade says it's not entirely clear. There's a bigger problem, however. There's a bigger problem with this argument besides it simply being somewhat unclear in the way I've just described. The bigger problem is that either way we go, whether we take 1 or 2 to be the meaning of capability of meaningful life outside the mother's womb, either way we go, the argument won't work. It won't do what Justice Blackman wants it to do. Either way we go, the argument is a bad argument. Well, how so? Let's examine the 2 different candidates, if you will, in detail. Oh, well, I'm getting ahead of myself. More likely than not, the fetus will survive outside the mother's womb. Let's consider that one. If that's what he means by capability of meaningful life outside the mother's womb, then how does the argument go? It would go something like this. Viability is the crucial point in the development of the fetus. Why? Because at that point, the fetus is likely to survive outside the womb. But wait a minute, what does viability mean? Viability is simply the name for that point of pregnancy at which the fetus is more likely than not to survive. And since that's the definition of viability, we should be able to just plug that in wherever we see the word viability. So, with respect to the state's important and legitimate interest in potential life, the compelling point is the point at which the fetus is more likely than not to survive. This is so because the fetus then at that point, now going down to 1, is more likely to survive, more likely than not to survive outside the mother's womb. If we substitute in reading 1 of capability of meaningful life outside the mother's womb, the argument becomes circular. That's the problem. Circular arguments are bad arguments. They don't work. They don't give good reason for thinking the conclusion is true, for thinking that the claim being argued for is true. How would this argument be circular? It's kind of what I just explained. Consider it again. 1, more likely than not that the fetus will survive outside the mother's womb. That's just what viability is. That's another statement that at that point the fetus is viable. And so if that's what Justice Blackmun means by capability of meaningful life outside the mother's womb, then he's essentially arguing that viability is the compelling point because at that point the fetus is viable. Well, that doesn't give you any reason for thinking that viability is the compelling point. We already know that the fetus is viable at that point. That's the point of viability. We're wondering why viability is the compelling point. The argument is circular. It doesn't give you any additional reason for thinking that the claim in question is true. Think of it this way. Imagine someone was skeptical or unsure or was just, skeptical, unsure about viability being this compelling point. Let's say, I don't know about that. I've heard some other things. Some people talk about consciousness. Some people talk about, some sort of advanced reasoning. Some people talk about the ability to feel pleasure or pain. I don't know. Why think viability? Or some people talk about having a heartbeat and whatever. Why think viability is this crucial point? I don't get it. Well, what's Blackmun's argument? Blackmun's argument is simply, if we take reading 1 here, his argument is simply, well, because it's viability. Well, that's not going to be convincing to somebody who has these other alternatives in mind, who is on the fence. You can't just say, well, viability is important because it's viability. That doesn't give any additional reason. Now, this is not to say that viability is not a crucial point. Maybe Blackmun's right about that. All that I'm pointing to is that the argument, the reason he gives for viability being important is not a good reason, right? That's what we're analyzing right now. He might be right at the end of the day, but the argument, the reason, the way he gets there doesn't work, arguably, right? Okay, so we haven't gone through all of it yet. We've just gone through 1, right? Maybe candidate 1. Maybe 1 is how we should understand capability of meaningful life outside the mother's womb. But if that's how we understand it, argument is circular, it doesn't work. So that's kind of a dead end. Let's not understand it in that way. Well, so maybe thankfully, we have this other alternative. Maybe it doesn't mean that, because then the argument's circular. So maybe Blackmun means by capability of meaningful life outside the mother's womb, that the fetus has the potential to be a productive member of society at that point. Well, there's a different problem with this clarification. The argument's not circular anymore. The problem now is that the argument doesn't really show what Blackmun wants it to show. It doesn't show that viability is the compelling point now. Because think of it this way. The fetus has the potential to be a productive member of society, right? It has the potential to have a family and hold down a career as whatever, an electrician or something, and whatever, pay taxes and do all the rest and vote in elections and so on. The fetus isn't going to do that right now. The fetus doesn't start doing that at viability, right? It has the capability, the potential to eventually do those things, right? it'll grow up and whatever, go to get his the electrician certification, start a family, and so on. It's not doing that stuff right now. It simply has the potential to do that stuff. The problem is that an embryo has that potential, right? An embryo has the capability of a meaningful life outside the mother's womb. In that sense, the embryo has the potential to be a productive member of society. If you let the embryo gestate and it develops and it grows and it's born and it goes to school and blah, 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 right? It'll be a tax-paying electrician just like the fetus at Viability. And so, if we understand capability of meaningful life outside the mother's womb in this second sense, it doesn't single out viability as the crucial point. It doesn't give a reason for thinking that viability is the crucial point. If anything, it would seem to single out conception as the crucial point, because at that point, now you've got a thing that has a potential to grow into an adult human, and so on and so forth. And we'll get to it later. And so, if anything, right, if we understand capability of meaningful life outside the mother's womb in this second sense, it would seem that Justice Blackmun would be required to argue that abortion can be regulated from the moment of conception, so throughout the whole pregnancy. But of course, that's not what he wants to argue, and that's not what he argues or claims, and that's not the law of the land. And so, this argument doesn't really seem to establish what he's looking for. If we have this phrase, capability of meaningful life outside the mother's womb. What does that mean? We can go one or two. If we go one, the argument's circular. If we go two, it doesn't show that viability is the crucial point. If anything, it looks like conception would be. And so Justice Blackmun, arguably, right, has not given us a good reason for thinking of viability as the crucial turning point in the development of the life of the fetus.